Hello again. This tutorial is for section 5 of the cloud cover blanket, and this is the point where we've got to the edging, and there are two options. There's the square option where you just put an edging around the squares that you've done so far, and there's also the larger rectangular option where we add extra rows top and bottom. That's what I did with my blanket, just to make it fit on a particularly large sofa. And I'll show you both versions today. This is obviously not the blanket, because the blanket in itself is just so big now that it won't fit under the camera. So I've just taken my two sample squares and joined them together all the way round with the continuous join as you go. So you can just use your imagination to think that this is the edge of the blanket. And the first thing we're going to do is turn the blanket to the wrong side, to the reverse side. And this round is going to be worked all the way around, all four sides of the blanket, and that's for both versions. And so it's obviously worked on the reverse, so it will be on its reverse side when you turn it back over. And we're working with the James Seabrecht Twinkle in Silver. That'll give a nice sparkly edge to the squares. And you just want to attach your yarn as usual in any corner. This is just going to be a round of granny treble clusters as usual. Double crochet if you're in the US. Chain 2 in the corner to start, and that's the equivalent of the first treble, and then 2 treble stitches in the corner space. Nothing different there. And then you want to work along with 3 treble stitches in each of the next 7 spaces along the edge of the blanket. So I'm going to stop the video and work along with that, and I'll come back because we have something a little bit different to do at this point. So I'll see you when I get there. So now we've got the 7 clusters done, and we're at this corner here. Now this is actually a point where the 2 squares met in the previous round. And if you look, you will see that there's the corner of this square here, and there's also the corner of the square that's right up against it. If you were to put 3 clusters in this corner and then 3 clusters in this corner, you would end up with an extra cluster. And each time you did that all the way round, it would grow by 1 cluster. The result of that is that you would end up with an edge which has too many stitches in it, and it starts to ripple. So what we want to do is make a cluster like this, but sitting on top of the join rather than one in each corner. And there's an easy way to do that. So what we want to do is start in the first corner with treble 1, like that, and then yarn over and start to make a second treble stitch by pulling through the yarn, yarn over and pulling through 2 as usual. But at this point, when there are still 2 loops on the hook, stop. Don't finish off that treble stitch. Instead, yarn over once again and put your hook into the next corner space. Pull up your loop, and you've got 4 loops on the hook. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops. You've got 3 loops left on the hook. Yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. Now, what's happened here is that you've done what's called a treble 2 together. You've got a stitch here that's half a stitch, and a stitch here that's half a stitch, and they're anchored at the top. So when I finish off this cluster, and you do that with 1 last treble stitch in the second corner, you can see that it looks a little bit different from the others. It looks like it's got 1, 2, 3, 4 posts the long part of the stitch, whereas these have just got 3. But in fact, if you look at the top, this is the important bit. There are 1, 2, 3 stitch tops in that cluster, and there are also 1, 2, 3 stitch tops in this cluster. So that, although it starts off by looking like 2 clusters, it comes into 1 at the top, and that's the important thing. And your cluster is now sitting right in the middle of that join. So that's the way to get over the joins between the squares. So after every 7 clusters along the edge, you'll come to another join. So you just need to work around the full 4 sides of your square with the treble clusters. When you get to the corners, the outside corners of the square, it's very simple. You've used it for all your granny squares. It's just treble 3, chain 2 and treble 3. So I'm going to work around this, pretending this is my square, my blanket, and I'll be back to show you the next round of the edge. See you in a minute. I've pulled out the rows of treble stitches that I've just done to show you what to do for the square version. So we're back to the twinkle edging, and I'm going to show you what I did for the rectangular version. Now, if you think, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my blanket round, and I'm just going to work on the short edge here. But that would just be one side of your square blanket that you'll be working on. So this is just me being lazy. I don't want to work the long side when I can work the short side, just to show you what to do. So this has, at the moment, the blanket is on its reverse side, and let's just say we've just finished the round of twinkle that goes all the way around all 4 sides. And now we're going to put a band of stripes in place on the top of the blanket and the bottom of the blanket. And then what we'll do after that is do our 2 rounds of treble stitch to edge the whole thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip my blanket over to the front again, and right up to this point here, and I'm going to work my granny stripes on this edge. Now it starts with 3 rows of the darker grey, 1 row of the twinkle, 3 rows of a mid-grey, 1 row of the twinkle, and so on until you get bands of colour getting lighter. So I'll just do a couple just to let you see. So again, we start with the chain 2, but there's something slightly different happens. We're not going round the corner this time. We're only going to be doing rows that go backwards and forwards. So we have to do something slightly different in this corner. So I've chained 2 and I'm going to put in 1 treble stitch. Now we are doing clusters, but for the very first corner, you don't put in 2 trebles and a chain 2. It's just the 1 chain 2 and 1 treble, and then after that it's just treble clusters as usual. I'm going to sort of work along here as quickly as I can because I want to show you what happens when we get to the end of the row. And this is just going to add a bit of length to your square blanket if that's what you want to do. It will give you a blanket that's a rectangular shape. It's very much up to you whether you want the square or the rectangular version. So I'm nearly at the end of my row. Yours, of course, will be the full length of one side of your blanket. Now, I'm just about at the corner. This is my last cluster before the corner. And like we did at the beginning, I'm going to put in 2 trebles. 1, 2. And that's all I'm going to put in that corner. We're not going around the corner, we're just stopping at that point. Now I'm going to work back the way. I'll need to turn it over. But first I'm going to chain 2. So it's ready. The row's finished and it's ready to turn. And this is us ready to start the second row. Now I've chained 2 here, and I'm not going to work anywhere near or particularly near that chain 2. I'm actually going to look for the very first space in the row below. So I've just done my chain 2 and I'm going to work into that space and put 3 trebles in. I'll let you see what happens. So my 3 trebles are in this space here. And what we've actually done by just chaining 2 and then moving on to the next space is that I've created a space here, which will be where I'll work my 3rd row into. So it keeps your edges nice and straight. And I'm just going to let you see what happens when I come along to the end once more. Just about there. See how it's looking nice? That's a really nice straight edge. So I've got 2 more clusters to do. And have a look at this now. We have got a cluster here, and then we've got the 2 stitches from row 1, which was in the corner. So what we're going to do is put our cluster in here. 1, 2, 3. Now, obviously, that's stopping short of the edge, so we want to put 1 more treble in, and this time pull apart the 2 stitch, the chain 2 and the treble 1 from the previous round, and make your single treble stitch in there. And again, that is keeping your edges nice and straight. So chain 2 and turn. And let's have a look at what happens here now. We have got the space, and anytime you see a space, you want to put your stitches into it. Now, if you go back to this very first row, you had 2 stitches, your chain 2 and 1 treble in the corner. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to repeat that and just put 1 treble stitch in that space that's right at the end, and then continue with our treble clusters all the way along. And then once this is our 3 rows nearly finished, and then it will be time to change the colour. So I'm going to work along to the end here, and then I'll be back to show you putting in the next colour. So I've come along to the end of row 3, and I'm just about finished with this colour. So all I need to do is put my 2 treble crochets in this very end space, just like we started with the 2. So it's 1, 2. And I'm not going to chain 2 at this point. I've cut my yarn, and instead I'm going to do the chain 2 with my next colour, which is the Twinkle. So I'm just going to pull that through, and that's us ready to go with that. Now, some people will just leave that end and sew it in just to keep my tension so it doesn't turn into a very loose stitch. I like to just give it a little knot, just a tight little knot, and the 2 ends will be woven in anyway, but that just stops everything from loosening up. And now we can chain 2 with the new colour. And off we go again. Right, so where are we with this one? We are on the same as row 2, so there's the space. We just need to put the 3 trebles into that space and continue. And that's our space created ready for the next colour. So I'll work along with this along to the end, and then I'll just get you started on the next colour, and then I'll leave you to finish off your stripes. And once you've finished this end, you'll just do exactly the same at the other end. Just bear in mind that you have the blanket the right, turned to the right way so that both ends are the same. So like we did before, we had turned the blanket after that round of the Twinkle, we turned the blanket. So we'll do that when you're doing the other end as well. So I'll just work along with that until I get to the end, and then I'll just show you the start of the next colour. And then after that, there's just the border to do. There's the round of Twinkle finished, or the row of Twinkle finished. And it was because it was, if you think about it, we've got 1 and 3 rows, or the numbers 1 and 3 are the same, 2 and 4 are the same. It's got the single treble crochet stitch at the very end. So you would just do the same, ready to start your new colour. All you would need to do is to cut this yarn, thread the new colour through the loop and chain 2, tie a little knot, and off you go with the new colour. So as I say, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 strips of this, and then you will have the border edge to do, which is exactly the same as the square one. It's the 2 rows of treble stitch in the darker grey, and it will go round the whole lot. So that is the border for the cloud cover blanket.